How's it going, everyone? This is the George here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, the eighth and supposedly final movie in the Mission Impossible franchise. It felt like a finale without spoiling it, but you never know in Hollywood. I mean, they're talking about making John Wick Chapter 5 despite Chapter 4 ending on a high note. But, anyways, this movie is once again directed by Christopher McQuarrie, who has directed the Mission Impossible movie since the fifth film, Rogue Nation. Once again, stars Tom Cruise, Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, Haley Atwell, and it kind of leaves off months after the events of Dead Reckoning. Ethan Hunt is once again trying to on this AI power thing called the Entity, and a lot of world-ending stuff could possibly happen. The stakes feel very high in this movie without spoiling the movie. But at one point, this was going to be Dead Reckoning Part 2, but now it's called Final Reckoning, and we got our movie. And this is the longest of the Mission Impossible movies at almost 2 hours and 50 minutes. And when it comes to Mission Impossible movies, I think this is probably the best action franchise out there, with the exception of the second movie, which I don't think is terrible, but I don't think it's that good either. These movies are consistently good. The first one and the third one are pretty good, are two pretty good movies. But then Ghost Protocol, which was directed by the director of The Incredibles, took it up a notch. It's still my second favorite Mission Impossible movie. And then Christopher McQuarrie just took the franchise to even bigger levels of greatness. And between Tom Cruise's stunt work, this man, whether he's in his 40s, 50s, now early 60s, he's just sacrificing his body, just doing all this crazy stunt work. The one that we've seen in the trailers so much, the plane sequence. And yes, that was crazy great in the movie. There's also a submarine sequence in this movie as well that he does such a great job with. Certain action sequences where, like, man, the way this guy's moving, it's hard to believe he's in his early 60s. And even though, as I said before, this is being marketed as the last Mission Impossible movie, the way it ends, you would think it is, without spoiling it. But knowing Tom Cruise, I can see him wanting to continue to play this character until the day he can't walk or jump or do stunt work. But yeah, Tom Cruise, once again, as Ethan Hunt, is crazy good as always. Ving Rhames as Luthor provides one of the more emotional scenes in the movie. Another favorite character that's been around since the beginning of this franchise. Simon Pegg as Benji, great as always. Haley Atwell as Grace. Her presence is really good in this movie, and it definitely fills in the absence of Rebecca Ferguson's character because, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Dead Reckoning, her character also dies in the previous movie. But there's quite a few characters that return in this movie from previous movies. Angela Bassett once again returns in this movie from Fallout. This time, though, she's president of the United States and she's dealing with a lot of stressful stuff. Kit Ridge once again returns the character who was in the previous movie. Henry Czerny once again plays his role. It feels like he was meant to have a bigger role in this movie. There's quite a couple characters I felt like were meant to have bigger roles in this movie, but they just didn't. I don't know if that was just cut down due to the length in the movie. And we'll get more into that throughout the movie. But overall, I would say the acting was really good in this movie to great. I'll say this, though. The villain, Gabriel, who I thought was going to be this great Mission Impossible villain because of the way he was set up in Dead Reckoning. At the beginning of the movie, I was like, wow, they're doing such a really good job with him. Isai Morales, who plays him I thought was doing a pretty good job. But towards the end of the movie, he was coming across as Saturday morning cartoon villainish for me. And I don't know, there's just a part of the movie where he's just absent. It's like he has a strong presence at the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie, but in the middle, he's not there. And I get it. The main threat is this AI because a lot of missiles and nukes can go off any minute now from different countries due to this AI. But you would think this guy is like the history this guy has with Ethan Hunt. The things that he did in the previous movie and was doing at the beginning of this movie, did at the beginning of this movie. You thought you were in for something, but kind of feel a little let down with how this villain was handled. The end result of this villain, basically. The action doesn't disappoint. Great, entertaining action. Although I feel like there's not as much in this as there was in Fallout and Dead Reckoning. I think I'll say that. Stunt work, fantastic as always. The anxiety you feel watching this movie, they do such a great job of making the audience feel anxious throughout this movie. Whether it's that submarine sequence I told you about, or the third act where so much is happening and all that. And something happens at the beginning of the movie with a certain character without spoiling it that you're like, oh wow, they actually did that to that character. And then it's like any character is game at this point as far as what could happen to them, what their fate could be, their end result. So there's a lot of it feels really tense. There's a lot of tension in this movie, and do such a great job of building that in the movie. And not that I think this was necessary, but they do such a really good job of connecting all the movies in here, whether it's through flashback sequences, which that's the unnecessary part, but it's actually really cool to see because you're kind of reflecting on nearly 30 years of this franchise because this is like going back to 1996 and what Ethan Hunt's been through the friends that he made, the friends that he lost, the enemies he made, and all that. Just reflecting on that stuff, the connection going back to the first movie, the connections there, the connections to Mission Impossible 3, bringing up what happened in Ghost Protocol. And I feel like it's unnecessary, but at the same time, I get where they're coming from because, again, this is a franchise that's been going on for 29 years, at least the Mission Impossible movie. I know Mission Impossible was a television series from years ago. But as far as the movies go, this has been going on for a while. There are people who weren't born when the first Mission Impossible movie came out. It came out the year I was born that didn't see it right away or didn't see Mission Impossible 2 because they weren't born yet, or even Mission Impossible 3. So there's a lot of history that obviously they want to explore right away, which I understand. And you know what? For the Mission Impossible franchise, I wouldn't call them a fan service franchise. This felt like a fan service moment, but it did feel earned because of how consistently good this franchise has been. And there's a couple of ties to certain characters from the first movie as well. There was one that I really liked that I think was handled very well, and then there's a character that's connected to a key character from the first movie. And again, like Kit Ridge, you feel like the stuff with this particular character was cut down, or like there was stuff there, but they didn't focus on it enough. So that was a little disappointing. I'll say this about Final Reckoning: you feel the runtime of this movie, and that's kind of a weird thing for me to say because the Mission Impossible movies have gotten longer as they've gone on. The last two, in particular, before this one, Fallout, which is still my favorite. I think that's the perfect Mission Impossible movie. It's around 2 hours and 3 minutes, I'm pretty sure. Dead Reckoning is not that much shorter than this movie, but it feels like those two movies were so quick paced and it felt like something was always going on where you felt entertained and didn't feel the runtime. Here, there's a lot more slow moments. The submarine sequence, in particular, that I mentioned, does feel like it goes on a bit longer than it probably should have. But because of the tension of what can happen to Ethan during that sequence, I feel like that's more forgivable. Well, I will say that. But it does feel its runtime for once. And that's a weird thing to say about a Mission Impossible movie. Of the Christopher McQuarrie directed Mission Impossible movies, I feel like this is the weakest. It's not better than Rogue Nation, Fallout, and Dead Reckoning. I don't even think it's better than Ghost Protocol. It's better than the first three, I'll say that, but it's in the middle, which doesn't make it a bad movie. I think it's a very good movie. I was very entertained, and the third act was very suspenseful. And the way that this concluded for the characters, I thought ended on a not really high note, but a pretty high note. Oh, not like super high, what I mean. But it feels like, especially given how spoiled we were with the Mission Impossible movies for over a decade, with the new direction that they start going with Christopher McQuarrie, that was also started by Brad Bird, you kind of expected more. But regardless, I do feel like Final Reckoning ended the series on a really good note. The performances were excellent. Villain was disappointing though, action doesn't disappoint, the stunt work doesn't disappoint, the stakes were great, the tension was great, right? The different settings that they go on felt great as well. If this is the last Mission Impossible movie, I think this is a good place to end. I know there's been talks of, hey, apparently Tom Cruise wants Glenn Powell to continue on, but he turned it down. I would leave this franchise alone for a while before you do spin-offs or retool, reboot, soft reboot, whatever you want to do. But I mean, even if they do something like that, I feel like for a lot of people, like what we've seen with certain franchises like Star Wars, the MCU, this is going to be the end for them if they decide to do more Mission Impossible movies. I feel like that this is going to be the end for some people, like how Avengers Endgame is the end of the MCU for some MCU fans, or how Return of the Jedi is the true end of Star Wars for a lot of Star Wars fans. This is going to be the end for Mission Impossible fans, I feel like. But regardless, overall, this was an entertaining movie that had emotional moments, great action, great acting, and can't believe that this franchise is over after 29 years. I'm going to give Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning a B+. I do recommend you check it out in the theaters. Again, it's the weakest of the Christopher McQuarrie directed Mission Impossible movies, but that doesn't make it a bad movie. It still makes it a very good movie. Just don't expect the quick paced, feels like there's always action happening in every sequence, direction that Rogue Nation, Fallout, and Dead Reckoning were. If anything, I feel like this is going to get compared to The Dark Knight Rises, which I think is a very good movie. I still like Dark Knight Rises a lot, but compared to Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, there's not as much action in there. There's a lot more slow moments that are more character-based, emotional, somber moments. And it does, and like The Final Reckoning feels longer than it needs to be, but again, like The Dark Knight Rises, it doesn't make Final Reckoning a bad movie. It just makes it a very good movie that's not as good as the last few movies that came out before it. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning? Have you seen it? What'd you think about it? And of the Mission Impossible movies, what is your favorite or least favorite? Let me know in the comments down below. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe already if you haven't. Please share us with someone that loves the Mission Impossible movies. And I hope to see you guys real soon. Take care, everyone.